Hello and welcome. This is Wilrens for Create a Learning Site, the place to go deeper in your study of the Bible. Disentangling the knot of 1 John. It needs that because 1 John is one of the strangest books in the New Testament. For one, it's called an epistle in most Bible versions, but nothing about the book suggests that it is indeed a letter. Simply compare the beginning and end of 1 John with one of Paul's letters. Here's the beginning. You will notice that it does not contain a single one of the structural elements that we know from other documents considered letters in the New Testament. There's no author, there are no recipients, there's no benediction or prayer. If anything, this text is more like a word of instruction, teaching, or exhortation, not unlike Hebrews. Apart from the concluding verses, Hebrews also lacks all structural elements that we expect to find in an ancient letter. In addition, 1 John appears to lack any progression of thought. And has very little structure. Instead, John circles around a limited number of topics, adding statement upon statement, seemingly without any particular order. It's a bit like a handful of dry sand, no obvious coherence or shape. If John would have handed this in as a paper for one of my classes, I'm not sure it would have earned him a passing grade. Of course, I realize limitation is on my side, but it illustrates the point. In my experience, this book makes for frustrating reading. I would much prefer an orderly and logical presentation that moves from A to B to C, all the way down to Z. This is one reason I have not often taught the epistles of John. Even though the language used in 1 John is delightfully simple, once you start to think about what it says, the text turns out to be a hard nut to crack. The paradox of 1 John is that it is almost simplistic and enigmatic at the same time. At least that's how I have experienced the book. It contains wonderful statements, but they don't seem to build an argument. The way a handful of dry sand does not possess coherence or shape, and you cannot build sandcastles with it. Over the past 1.5 years, I've been given a second chance with 1 John through the opportunity to teach the book in 2 different schools. This forced me to wrestle once again with John's way of thinking. As a result, I'm finally beginning to understand it better. In what follows, I will first discuss some of the historical background, because it helps us to see where John is coming from, or rather what he is coming against. And after this, I will share what I have come to understand about how this book works. I have to formulate this cautiously, since it's a work in process. I'm certainly not close to being done with it. It is not hard to see in 1 John that the author is coming against a group of people who do not care about sin. They may even think they are without sin, and who do not care about love. They also do not believe certain things about Jesus. And this is probably the root cause for their deficient behavior. The following 3 verses present the clearest picture of what they believed. Who is the liar, but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming, and now is in the world already. This is he who came by water and blood, Jesus Christ, not by the Father only, but by the water and the blood, and the Spirit is the one who testifies, because the Spirit is the truth. From church history and from the church fathers, we know a bit more about the circumstances in the area where John was active. There were two new belief systems that arose around that time. One is called Docetism, and the other is linked with the name of Cerinth or Cerinthus. Now, Docetism derives from the Greek word dokein, to seem or to appear. In this view, the divine could not possibly defile or pollute itself by taking on human flesh and becoming part of the material world. Neither could the divine suffer or die. Therefore, Jesus merely appeared human, but certainly wasn't fully human in our sense, in our way of understanding that. It was only human in a special and restricted sense. Cerinthus claimed that Jesus had been a normal human being, and the heavenly Christ had descended on him in baptism in the form of a dove. In other words, he separated Jesus from Christ. Just before the crucifixion, Christ had departed from Jesus because the divine Redeemer could not possibly taste death, leaving the human Jesus to die on the cross. Now, the error inherent in this kind of position is serious indeed. First of all, Jesus Christ cannot redeem what he did not become. If he did not become fully human, he cannot fully redeem humans. And besides, this view marks the material world as inferior or worse, as something bad and negative, contrary to the biblical view of creation as good. Scholars disagree whether John is reacting to one or the other of these two heresies, or whether he is perhaps dealing with both at the same time. It certainly seems that the second verse here, 1 John 4 verse 2 and 3, which says Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, would fit well with Docetism as background, whereas the first verse here, 1 John 2 verse 22, where it says where someone denies that Jesus is the Christ, would go well with the views of Cerinth. The third verse, 1 John 5 verse 6, water and blood, could go with either. The Docetists believed that Jesus had been baptized, that's the water, but he did not die, so there was no blood. Whereas Cerinthus thought Christ left Jesus before he died, so he also affirmed water, but not blood. So far, the historical background. So what have I discovered through my renewed engagement with 1 John? Well, my approach to study the book has been to categorize the statements and see if I can rearrange the ideas in the book in such a way that a larger message or plot emerges. So what did I come up with? Well, I noticed that many statements take one of four forms. There are those beginning with if, about 9 of those. There are many statements including a who, he who, everyone who, no one who, whoever. There's about 25 of those. And then there's statements including we know, 13, and statements beginning this by this. This makes for a formidable number of statements that enable the reader to determine whether something or someone is one or the other. In other words, a significant part of this book consists of tests. It has long been recognized that these tests predominantly deal with three areas: truth, that is, right belief or doctrine; love, both of God and of the brethren; and morality, that has to do with right behavior. It has also stood out to many readers that the book contains two direct statements about God that are short and simple, but tremendously profound. In English, each statement counts only three one-syllable words: God is light, and God is love. Virtually everything else in the book flows from these two foundational statements. Think about it. Are we able to come up with a more profound statement about God than these two? The two even make for some sort of a structural divide in the book. God is light dominates the first half of the book. God is love fulfills a similar role in the second half of the book. It does not provide for a clear structure, first because the two themes overlap in chapter 3, and second because the topical cluster of truth, deceivers, discernment, which fits more readily with God is light, continues to pop up in the second half of the book. We now begin to see that the structure of the book is not linear, but circular. John jumps back and forth between his main centers of interest, those three tests and the two foundational thoughts about God, circling and spiraling around him until he has covered them from more or less every side. This kind of structure cannot be captured in the sort of diagram or horizontal chart that is so helpful with many other books in the Bible. Instead, the structure of the book is a structure of ideas, not of blocks of material. We therefore need a different sort of structural diagram, one that captures the main idea in the book. The twofold God is statement gives us a place to start. Let's combine this with the three tests that John includes: right belief, right behavior, that is, keeping his commandments, and right love. This diagram will help us to sum up the core of the book. It's easy to see now how the main themes relate to each other. The tests flow from the two foundational statements, but they also flow from each other in this way. In the end, the three tests are closely linked, inseparably so. You cannot have or fulfill one without fulfilling the others. Let's look at this a little bit more in detail. Now, right behavior, that's keeping his commandments. This flows from knowing God and being in the light, as well as from loving God. If we know God, if we believe rightly about Him, if we are in the light as He is in the light, if we love Him, then we will keep His commandments. This, therefore, is also a consequence of right belief and right love. At the same time, to keep his commandments means, well, first of all, to believe in his Son, and second, to practice love. 1 John 3, verse 23, and this is the commandment, that we believe in his Son, that we believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another, just as he has commanded us. And 1 John 4, verse 21, this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. Right belief and right love include and are expressed by keeping his commandments. His commandments are to believe and to walk in love. This is profoundly circular. I still struggle with the logic of 1 John. I don't find it easy to wrap my brain around it. But in the process, I've developed a deep appreciation for this statement of what it means to live life with God, or in John's terms, to know and to walk in the truth. Next month will be special. I won't have a 20-minute presentation on a topic, but instead I'll be announcing the release, at last, of my ebook with internet resources for studying and teaching books of the Bible. And I will also let you know how you can get it as a free download. So don't miss it. See you then.